Makes a difference. So great job. Thank you for that. So let's pretend a little bit this morning. You with me? Let's do a little pretending. Let's pretend that you have a late August, late summer wedding that you've been invited to and you want to go, since we're pretending. We're not assuming anything. I'm just wanting to make sure that we're all together, because as soon as I said that, some of you were like, yeah, we're definitely pretending. No, now this is a wedding. This is a wedding where the couple that's getting married, you care very deeply about this couple, and you're involved in their life, and this matters a lot to you, so you're very eager to attend this wedding. It's going to be an extravagant event. It's not like a little country wedding where everybody, at best puts on some khakis and a button-up shirt. This is a fancy wedding. This is a wedding where you actually have been invited as an honored guest. And so, of course, you need a new dress or a new suit. You with me so far? We're pretending. Now, as we're pretending, you need a new dress or a new suit, but you don't have any idea where you're going to buy one of those things. You just don't know. For some weird reason, you don't know where they sell dresses and suits. But for some weird reason, you do know that there's this large store in Burlington called PetSmart. You've seen it from the freeway, you've driven by it, and you know that they sell lots of stuff there. And so, you decide that you're going to go to PetSmart to try and find your new suit or your new dress. You take off for an afternoon of shopping. And after a thorough and exhausting search up and down every aisle, you've searched high and low, you've come up short. You may have found a new toy or a new bag of treats for Fido, but what you didn't find are any suits or any dresses. And you come to the conclusion, after your thorough search, that if you're going to find a suit or a dress, you're going to have to shop somewhere other than PetSmart. And friends, this is the basic lesson that Solomon's going to teach us today as we get into the book of Ecclesiastes, chapter 1 and into chapter 2. Now we know from last week, we learned that the vanity of life is inescapable, and we were very careful to define what this vanity means. We said, by definition, it's like a mist. It tells us about the temporalness of life, that life is very short. And it's like a fog or like smoke that's hard to see through. It's difficult to interpret life. It's hard to comprehend all the things that go on in life. We also recognize that there's this monotony or this repetitiveness to life, and that a lot of the activities of life that are repetitive and monotonous, that the futility of those things are inescapable. This is how we define the vanity of life that is inescapable. So we learned that. Now we also learned, as we began chapter 1, we went through those first 11 verses, we understood that the preacher here, as he calls himself, is Koheleth, or Solomon, probably Solomon, the son of David, the king of in Jerusalem, that he's writing this at the end of his life. And what he's writing, he's looking back on his life, and now he's giving us his treatise, this formal statement about his philosophy of life and what he's learned as the richest and wisest man who's ever lived. But we also said that this is the beginning of his treatise, that he didn't end it with his opening statement, that he has a lot to say about it, and he won't close his thought on this until the very end of the book of Ecclesiastes. And so we have to hold steady along the way and learn what we can. Right? Zach Eswine, who wrote Recovering Eden, said this: ultimately, the preacher wants to point out what is vain in order for us to discover what isn't. So that's what we got to pay attention to along the way. He's trying to point out all that is vain so that we can see, we can discover for ourselves what isn't vain. Now we're going to read our text, and I want you to be attentive to a few things here this morning as we read it. Last week I described an inclusio. It's really an intelligent form of writing, and the whole book of Ecclesiastes is an inclusio. He makes a statement about the vanity of life, that all is vanity at the very beginning. He makes the same statement at the very end, and then he draws his full conclusion. Well, today's text it contains an inclusio in and of itself. It's in chapter 1, verse 4, and chapter 2, verse 11. I want you to listen for it as we're reading it. I also want you to listen for the structure of this, because this, as I said last week, these are not the ramblings of an old man. This is a concise, well thought through, carefully articulated statement. And so he's writing with structure. He's taking time to write this. And so in the structure, here's what we're going to hear. He's going to say, I applied my heart to something, and then I said in my heart. And then I applied my heart to something else, and then I said in my heart, and then I considered. So that's what we're going to listen for. I applied my heart, I said in my heart. I applied my heart, I said in my heart, then I considered. That's our structure. And we can't miss also the personal pronouns here. I, me, and myself in this short passage are repeated 4 times. So we've got to listen for that. So let's read our text starting in verse 12 of chapter 1. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. It is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. I have seen everything that is done under the sun, and behold, all is vanity, a striving after wind. What is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. And I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. I perceived that this also is but a striving after wind. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. Chapter 2. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. I made great works, built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees. I made myself pools from which to water the forest of growing trees. I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. I got singers, both men and women, and many concubines, the delight of the sons of man. So I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired, I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure. For my heart found pleasure in all my toil, and this was my reward for all my toil. Then I considered all that my hands had done, and the toil I had expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So again, this is a reflection back to chapter 1, verse 3, where he says, what does man gain from all his toil under the sun, at which he toils under the sun? So last week he lays this foundation of the vanities of life, its shortness, its repetitiveness, its futility, and now he's saying, I've done some things, I've searched out some things, and I've come to the conclusion, answering my own question, that there was no gain to be had. There's no profit. At the end of the day, no net profit for all of the energy that I expended in this endeavor. So clearly, in our text today, the preacher is searching. He's trying to find something. We'll define this something that he's trying to search out for as just simply this one word, satisfaction. He's searching for satisfaction in life under the sun. under heaven. He uses this phrase. So let's define this word satisfaction. And as I define it, I want you to reflect on whether or not you think you've found it. Satisfaction is defined as this: contentment and joy that comes from knowing and resting in the true meaning of life. Now, there are some in this world who have not yet found the true meaning of life, and so they lack contentment and joy. They neither know it nor are resting in it. There are others who actually have discovered the true meaning of life. They know it, but they're not resting in it as of yet. So ask yourself, am I experiencing satisfaction? This is what Koheleth, the preacher, Solomon, was searching for in all of these grand endeavors. Now, before we get into the details, let's think about this. Think of all of the things that he said he had, that he did, that he experienced, that he studied. This is no weekend adventure, friends. He was on this search for years. This is something that he sought out diligently for years before he came to his conclusion. So the search is on. Where does the preacher start? He starts searching by studying life under heaven. Notice back to verse 12 and 13. I, the preacher, have been king over Israel in Jerusalem, and I applied my heart. That means he concentrated on it. This word applied means to concentrate, to think deeply, to give oneself to it. I applied my heart to seek and to search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. So the preacher is studying life. This is how he starts. He's like a detective here. He's like a postgraduate Sherlock Holmes, investigating and examining, quote, all that is done under heaven. He's studying life, all that is done under heaven. Under heaven is a synonymous phrase to under the sun, things that are done on planet Earth. And he is learning to become an actual expert in all of these things. The testimony in the historical books of the Old Testament give us some context here. So we could go to 1 Kings chapter 4, and this is what it says of Solomon. God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure. I don't know about you, but I would love that to be said of me, but it is not true. God gave Solomon wisdom and understanding beyond measure, and breadth of mind like the sand on the seashore. He's the smartest guy, not just in the room, friends. He's the smartest guy on the planet. God has given this to him, and what we have to discover is, even as the smartest guy, even as the guy who knows more than anybody else on any given subject, he's still not satisfied. Look at what it says here in 1 Kings 4. So that Solomon's wisdom surpassed the wisdom of all the people of the east and all the wisdom of Egypt, for he was wiser than all other men, wiser than Ethan. You know Ethan, the Ezrahite? Evidently it meant something to the people back then. He's wiser than Ethan, the Ezrahite. And Heman, Calcol, and Darda, the sons of Mahol, whoever they are. And his fame was in all the surrounding nations. Notice, he also spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs were 1,005. He spoke of trees, from the cedar that is in Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of the wall. He's a dendrologist, friends. This isn't just like, oh yeah, I know how to identify a Douglas fir. It says that he had breadth of mind like the sand of the seashore. He knew more than anybody else. He's an actual scientist when it comes to trees and shrubs. He's a dendrologist. Whoa, that's big stuff. And it says also that he spoke also of beasts, so he's a zoologist as well. And then it says that he studied birds. He spoke of birds. Ornithology? Whoa, how about that? Solomon, this guy, reptiles? Herpetology? Yeah, I had to look all these up, don't worry, right? I have no idea, right? And then fish, my favorite one, ichthyology. Wow, how about that? Solomon knows all of this, and people of all nations came to hear the wisdom of Solomon. Think about how brilliant, how extravagant this man is. People are so impressed by his knowledge and his wisdom that they would travel the world in a day when travel wasn't easy, just to sit in his presence, just to be around him, and from all the kings of the earth who had heard of his wisdom. This is a remarkable man. And he's like a detective searching out. It says seeking and searching out by wisdom, by the very wisdom that God had given him that was as grand as anything we could ever possibly fathom, all that is done under heaven. And he discovered that 3 things in life are universally true. In all of his study, in all of his research, he discovered 3 universally true things. And the first thing he discovered is that people are unhappy. Look at verse 13. It says, it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. Have you ever noticed that? I mean, we don't have to be Solomon to see this. It doesn't matter if it's a first world setting or a third world setting. People are unhappy. They're alive, but they're not really enjoying it. This idea of satisfaction, of having contentment with joy, really has escaped the human race. This is like Genesis 3, pain and childbirth, production only through the sweat of the brow, toilsome life that's given to us, isn't actually in and of itself all that fun. It's an unhappy business. But notice the text. It is an unhappy business that God has given. So this isn't about us kind of shipwrecking our own lives and making things ugly and hard on ourselves because of our own poor choices. We do plenty of that ourselves, or other people sinning against us and wrecking things for us and draining the happiness out of life. This isn't about sin. This is just about life on earth, under heaven, under the sun. And it is an unhappy business that God has given to the children of man, right? This is what the text tells us, right? So when Adam sinned, the created world was subjected to futility by God. When Adam sinned, the created world itself was subjected to futility. This is Genesis 3, right? By the sweat of your brow, in pain and childbirth. In Romans 8, it says this, that the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly. Creation didn't willingly subject itself to humility or to futility, but because of him who subjected it. But notice, it's in hope. The world was subjected to futility in hope that the creation itself will be set free from its bondage to decay and obtain the freedom of the glory of the children of God. So somehow, all of the world has been subjected to futility, and the hope of being free from that futility is tied to being a child of God. Let's not miss that. God is the one who subjected the world to this futility. Could it be that he has kept from the world this sense of satisfaction, happiness, contentment, joy, in and of itself, so that we would seek him? It seems like that's what's being said in Romans 8. We were subjected to futility in hope. Okay, so this is what Solomon learns. First thing, universally true, people are unhappy. Second thing he recognizes that human activity is futile. After a thorough search of everything done under the sun, his expert opinion is that human activity is incapable of producing satisfaction. At best, any sort of sense of accomplishment, any sort of sense of contentment, any sort of sense of satisfaction is temporal. It's like a mist. It goes away. And here we get this new phrase that are to describe this. It's a striving after wind, and we'll hear this over and over again. So before, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Everything's weariness. And now we get this idea of a striving after wind. Efforts put forth, most people put forth some sort of effort in this way, trying to secure some sort of sense of happiness, contentment, through the things that are done under heaven. This is Solomon's subject of study here. Search out by wisdom all that is done under heaven. And people all over under heaven are trying to secure some form of satisfaction, of contentment. And Solomon's conclusion is, it's like chasing after the wind. There's all sorts of activity. There's running about. There's heavy breathing and perspiration. But at the end, you have nothing in your hands. You can't catch the wind with your hands. This is what he says. There's an emptiness. So, second universally true thing, human activity is futile. We're unable to secure that satisfaction through our own efforts. The third universally true thing that Solomon finds is in verse 15, and it comes to us by way of a proverb. He says that people can't change the way things are. What is crooked, he says, cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. Life on earth, as it has been subjected to futility, and because of the permeating presence of sin, life on earth is bent away from the way things were intended to be. It's bent that direction. That's why we don't have to teach our children to tell lies. They naturally tell them. We have to try to bend them back to the way things are. That's why people are bent toward away from the things of God. They're bent that way. What is crooked cannot be made straight. Ecclesiastes 7:13, as we'll get there in a couple of weeks, says, "Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what has been made crooked?" You say, wait. Let's read that again. Consider the work of God. Who can make straight what has been made crooked? People cannot change the way things are on planet Earth. There is a futility to it that will not be overcome by human endeavor. It will always be bent away from its original intent, and we are not able to bring it back. We're just simply not. Now, you say, well, wait a second. Do we just then live passive lives? No, not at all. All of Scripture counsels us otherwise. If we can improve quality of life, our own quality of life or somebody else's, if we can alleviate suffering, we can and we should give ourselves to those things. Most definitely. But we are not going to be the saviors of the world. We can do some good, and that matters an awful lot. And in fact, we will be rewarded by God for the good that we do. But we are not going to change Earth's bent. We're simply not. People can't do that. It will always be this way until Jesus straightens it out. And we're promised that one day Jesus will straighten it out. So he says, what is crooked cannot be made straight, and what is lacking cannot be counted. This word lacking here means deficiencies. So he's doing all this study, all of this searching, everything that's done under heaven, and he says there's so many deficiencies to the way things are on earth that I can't even count them. Smartest guy in the world cannot count. He can't even list all of the deficiencies. They're overwhelming. So these are the universally true things that he finds in his detective work, and he ends up, verse 16 tells us that he ends up acquiring wisdom. I said in my heart, I have acquired great wisdom, surpassing all who were over Jerusalem before me, and my heart has had great experience of wisdom and knowledge. Now, that's not a bad thing to acquire. He's acquired this wisdom, and we know from 1 Kings 4 that God is the one who gave him this wisdom. He started out with some wisdom, and he went on this search, and over the course of this, God just flooded him with wisdom and knowledge, and he becomes so just magnificently brilliant that people travel from all over the world. Problem is, that's not what he was searching for. He didn't find what he was searching for. He had looked for something else. Kind of like our trip to PetSmart. We're trying to find the dress. We're trying to find the suit. And no matter how hard we look in PetSmart, they simply aren't there. They don't sell them. And this is what Solomon discovers about satisfaction. It can't be found under heaven. And so, he's acquired this knowledge, and now he's going to take this knowledge and he's going to continue his search. He started by studying everything that was done under heaven. Now, he's going to up his game a little bit, and rather than just simply study it by book, by observation, now he's going to experience it. That's number 2. The preacher searched by experiencing life under heaven. Because it's one thing to come to the knowledge of something because you've read a book or because you've heard somebody tell you about it. It's quite different when you know it by way of experience. So, just a little over a week ago, Denny and Rachel Mua had their first baby boy. His name is Walter. Is Walter in here right this minute, Denny? He's in the other room. Okay, so we wanted to welcome Walter. He was here last Sunday, but I didn't get a chance to. But Walter, yes. So I just love Walter Mua, huh? Oh, it's going to be awesome to watch this little guy grow in grace and in the knowledge of God. So prior to actually experiencing having a baby, Denny and Rachel probably had an idea of what it was like. Knowing Denny and Rachel, they probably read a book or two, and they've probably had all sorts of people give them counsel about what it's like. And so they knew about it, but they didn't fully know about it because they hadn't experienced it themselves. So this is what Solomon does. He now is going to learn by experience what he only knew in knowledge. Make sense? So, first thing he does is he tells us of his intentions. And verse 17, and I applied my heart to know wisdom and to know madness and folly. He's applying his heart. Again, that's that idea of concentrating, giving yourself to something over a long stretch of time so as to acquire all of this knowledge. Now, this isn't book knowledge here. The Hebrew word where he says to know wisdom and to know madness and folly, the Hebrew word here is yada. It means to know by personal experience. That's why Denny and Rachel have a yada of what it's like to have a baby now versus before simply having some sort of a, intellectual understanding of it. So now he's going to know these things. Give you an idea of the true personal nature of what this word yada means is we find it, one of the first times it's used in Scripture is in Genesis 4:1, where it says, and Adam knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and gave birth to Cain. He knew her. It's very personal. It's like a hands-on, intimate experience. And so Solomon's saying, before I studied, searched out, I sought and searched out. Now I applied my heart to know it. By personal experience, I want to know wisdom, and I want to know, personal experience, madness and folly. And so he wants to have this. He's going to have this personal experience by wise living and by its opposite. Madness and folly here means to foolish and senseless behavior. And he's going to try them both to see if either will produce what he's hoping for, satisfaction. So he tells us what he discovered about wisdom. Second part of verse 17. I perceive that this also is but a striving after wind. He gives us another proverb. For in much wisdom is much vexation, and he who increases knowledge increases sorrow. So experiencing these things didn't produce for Solomon anything different than what he knew by way of his intellectual pursuits. So really, he didn't even have to go try to experience it. He knew it intellectually, and it didn't produce anything different by experiencing it personally. You see it? The second thing that we find here as he discovers about wisdom is that to know something about things and not be able to, things that are deficient. Remember all these crooked ways? What's lacking cannot be counted, all these deficiencies. He studied all these. He's finding all this information out, and he's seeing how wrong things are on planet Earth, how bent away from the way things were intended to be they are. So he has all this knowledge, and he can't do anything about it. And he's saying that's vexation. It's like torture, personal torture. To have much wisdom is vexation. Now, we shouldn't conclude then that it makes no difference between being wise or being a fool. We'll learn next week that there is a difference. It's better to be wise than to be a fool. We'll learn that next week. So that we can't conclude, well, since there's no actual result in having wisdom, why not just be a fool? No, that's not the conclusion we're supposed to come to. And we shouldn't conclude that we should avoid all of the brokenness and the sad parts of life. We shouldn't conclude that either, because we know Jesus himself was a man of sorrow, one who was acquainted with grief. And if we are following Jesus, we also should be acquainted with such things. Okay, so he tells us what he learns about wisdom. And now, as we get into chapter 2, he's going to tell us what he discovered about madness and folly. I said in my heart, come now, I will test you with pleasure. So this is like raw, pure hedonism. He's going to live life for personal pleasure. Enjoy yourself, he says to himself. Enjoy yourself. But behold, this also was vanity. I said of laughter, it is mad, and of pleasure, what use is it? This is his conclusion of what he learns about madness and folly. He sets aside wisdom, and now he's engaging in this foolish and senseless behavior, just pure hedonism. So he's enjoying himself. We know that. He's having a good time. He's having pleasure. He's enjoying himself. But he concludes this also is vanity. It did not bring him what he was hoping for. It did not satisfy his soul, even though he's giving himself wholly to this, and he has the means to do it. He has more money than any of us could possibly dream of, so he has the means to have all sorts of fun. And he finds at the end of his grand venture that it too is vanity. So he tells us what he tried. We understand what he's learned about madness and folly. It's of no use. It's pleasure. It's of no use. Laughter is like insanity. And so he tells us what he tried. Now, when we get into this list, I want you to recognize something. This list is not a list of all of the evils on planet Earth. It's not a list of all the evils under the sun. The list that he gives us are things that within their proper boundaries, many of them are actually good and fine things. So we can't misinterpret what we're reading here. He's going to tell us what he tried as he's practicing, as he's trying to experience both wisdom, madness, and folly. So he points out that it's insane, not because they're all sinful, but because they do not produce what we're hoping they will produce. And this is like the plight of humanity here. When we look at this list, you go, man, it's like we're reading the newspaper, we're reading the news online, we're hearing about people's lives, because this is the list that everybody tries from eternity past. Since life's on planet Earth, this is what people try to satisfy their souls. And Solomon, who tried it better than anybody else ever has, came to the conclusion that it's insane. These things do not satisfy us. So what did he try? Well, he tried alcohol. This is what he says. He says, I searched with my heart how to cheer my body with wine. Notice, my heart still guiding me with wisdom, and how to lay hold on folly till I might see what was good for the children of man to do under heaven during the few days of their life. So he tries alcohol. He thinks, well, maybe if I could just relax a little bit, I'm going to cheer my body with wine. Notice when he says, my heart's still guiding me with wisdom, he wasn't attempting to drink himself into oblivion. He had enough wisdom to know that if some alcohol isn't doing the trick, adding more probably isn't going to do the trick either. You follow? Right? So he's just saying, hey, I just need to relax a little bit. I just need some help. And he's asking alcohol to do something for him. And he comes to the conclusion that alcohol can't do that for me. Right? What I need alcohol, what I'm wanting alcohol to do, what my soul needs, alcohol won't do. It can't do that for me. That's what he's saying. I tried it, and it didn't work. Okay, what do we see next? What does he do? Verse 4, I made great works. So he's going to strive for achievement. This is what he's going to just go for, just kind of build his own fiefdom. This is going to be a big, big thing. I made great works. I built houses and planted vineyards for myself. I made myself gardens and parks and planted in them all kinds of fruit trees, and I made myself pools from which to water the forests and growing trees. So there's this great endeavor, these great achievements But you can't miss how many myselfs there are in those few verses. I made myself these things. Interesting, right? We can't miss that. But this is all he's trying to get a sense of, okay, I matter. My life is complete. I have a sense of lasting joy. I'm happy. I'm content. It's all satisfaction. And he's doing all of these grand endeavors, and what we'll find out later is he actually is enjoying them while he's doing them, but at the end of the day, he still doesn't have what he's looking for. The human achievement doesn't settle the human soul. This is what he discovers, right? And especially when it's sought selfishly. Like a selfish, self-centered life really becomes this very small world. And it might look grand from the outside. I mean, imagine what it looked like to all of the people that were observing Solomon. They probably assumed this guy's got to be, he's the smartest guy in the world, he's the richest guy in the world, he's got to be the happiest guy. And Solomon's on the inside of his little fiefdom, and he's looking out and he's going, what I need isn't in here. I've tried everything, and I'm still lacking. So he's tried achievement. The goal of life evidently isn't personal achievement. And so what does he do? Now he moves toward power. Now he's going to acquire, he says, I bought male and female slaves and had slaves who were born in my house. And in the ancient days, it's very common, but the slavery in these ancient days is not like the slavery that we have as a part of the American history. They're not even comparable. Some other day I'll talk about that, but they're not comparable. This is more like he's acquiring lots of servants in his household, people doing all sorts of things for him, serving his needs and the needs of his kingdom. And it was a sign of power. If you had servants, or as it said here, slaves, you were a prestigious person. You had power. And he's saying, I got people doing everything for me. I'm at the top of the heap, and people are serving me, and I'm at the top, but it's like kind of empty up here. Then he says, I'm going to work toward materialism. I also, the second half of verse 7, I had also great possessions of herds and flocks, more than any who had been before me in Jerusalem. And I also gathered for myself silver and gold and the treasure of kings and provinces. So he's trying materialism. He's hoarding for himself all of these possessions, and he's thinking, man, if I could just get a little more, if I could just accumulate a little bit more. It's like he's in a competition, and at the end of the competition, he wins. There isn't anybody else in all of the history of Jerusalem that has ever had more than he has. So you think, well, surely now he'll be satisfied. Didn't work. Right? You know, Jesus once told a story about the accumulation of wealth. It's recorded in Luke chapter 12, and I want to read it for us today. It's an important thing for us to grasp as Americans, not just as humans, but as Americans, because, as I said, the list of things that Solomon's tried, probably all of us are trying a version of them to one degree or another. Or we have tried them, and we've come to the same conclusion that Solomon came to, that it doesn't work, that they're not self-satisfying. And so Jesus tells this story, and he said to them, take care and be on your guard against all covetousness, for one's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. He's defining life. One's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions. And he's tying it to that 10th commandment. Do not covet. You see the tie? And so he told them a parable saying, the land of a rich man produced plentiful. So he's already rich, and his land is producing more. And he thought to himself, what shall I do? For I have nowhere to store my crops. And he said, I will do this. I will tear down my barns and build larger ones, and there I will store all my grain and all my goods. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have ample goods laid up for many years. Relax, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, fool, this night your soul is required of you, and the things you have prepared, whose will they be? And then Jesus ends his story with this phrase, so is the one who lays up treasure for himself and is not rich toward God. See, friends, materialism won't do it. Materialism, the acquisition of material goods and personal wealth, is not going to do it for us. And there's a warning in this text that says, not only is it not good, but you shouldn't even try to prove it. Be rich toward God, not selfishly acquiring the goods of this world. It isn't that having something is improper, but are you rich toward God? Is everything spent on self, or are we generous? Thankfully generous in other ways. So materialism didn't do it. Entertainment didn't do it. He got singers, it says. Male and female singers. He's entertained, he's laughing, he's enjoying himself. And remember, he said at the end, it was mad. My laughter itself got silly. It was just pointless. Being entertained endlessly did not satisfy his soul. And last, it says he tried both sex and political power as the note of concubines, and many concubines here, the delight of the sons of man. So a concubine is it's actually a formal relationship. A man would bring a woman into relationship. She would not have the same rights as a wife. It's a formal relationship, and it was often used to make alliances with foreign powers. So that's why we talk about the political power. So that's one of the things that Solomon did, is he acquired all these concubines from all these foreign nations, and he's making peace treaties with all these foreign nations. So he's acquiring all sorts of political power. He's really one of this, the dynasty here now is one of the ruling powers of the world, in part because of all these concubines, but there's also sexual pleasure that's engaged with all of this. And he says, at the end of the day, that didn't do it either. And it's madness, he says. So he's searching by studying, he's experiencing life under heaven, and so we already know point number 3. He came up short. In all of his study, in all of his search, he came up short. Now notice, he became great, right? Verse 9, so I became great and surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Wouldn't it be nice if that was the end of the story? So all I have to do is pursue all of these things, and I'll be great, and that'll be great. I'll be happy, it'll be great. I'll be great. This is what he says. I became great, but he came up short. And he even says, in all the while I was having a good time, so I became great, surpassed all who were before me in Jerusalem. Also my wisdom remained with me, and whatever my eyes desired I did not keep from them. I kept my heart from no pleasure, for my heart found pleasure in all my toil. So he's having a good time. But that was the only reward he had for it. Momentary pleasure, and at the end he came up short. He was still empty. Then I considered. So we get to the end of the matter. Then I considered all that my hands had done and the toil that I expended in doing it, and behold, all was vanity, a striving after wind, and there was nothing to be gained under the sun. So he's the wisest guy, he's the wealthiest guy, but he's still searching for something because his soul is still restless. At the end of the day, it was at best momentary pleasure, and then it was like a mist. He could not procure his deep desire. Human beings have a deep desire to experience this sense of satisfaction, and he couldn't do it. He was chasing the wind, nothing gained under the sun. I've got a bit of a lengthy quote from an author, David Gibson, a book I read in preparation for Ecclesiastes, and it'll take just a moment to read, but I think it's worth reading. It's in his book called Living Life Backward. Because we're not to think that Solomon is an isolated case. Oh, he's an anomaly. The rest of the human race isn't quite like that. You and I both know that we're all like this. He's like the prototypical human here. So David Gibson says, let's pretend. Let's pretend that if we get that promotion, or we see our church grow, or we bring up good children, then we'll feel significant and leave a lasting legacy behind us. Let's pretend that if we change jobs or emigrate to the sun, we won't experience the humdrum tedium of the ordinariness of life. Let's pretend that if we move to a new house, we'll be happier and we will never want to move again. Let's pretend that if we end one relationship and start a new one, we won't feel trapped ever. Let's pretend that if we were married or we weren't married, we would be content. Let's pretend that if we had more money, we would be satisfied. Let's pretend that if we get through this week's pile of washing and dirty diapers and shopping lists and school runs and busy evenings, then next week will be quieter. Let's pretend that time is always on our side to do the things we want to do and become the people we want to be. Let's pretend that we can break the cycle of repetition and finality and finally arrive in a world free of weariness. Let's pretend. So, you think, well, if there's no hope for us ever securing true happiness under heaven, is there any hope at all? Let me say that again. Are we to conclude that since there's no hope of us ever finding true happiness under heaven, is there any hope at all? And this is where we're led. We will always come up short when we try to find satisfaction under heaven. You and I will be as successful at finding that true satisfaction under heaven in our lives, under heaven, under the sun, the things from human activity on planet Earth. We'll be as successful at that as we would be at finding a suit or a dress at PetSmart. They don't sell them there, friends. True peace, true contentment cannot come from anything within man's power. We are unable to produce this ourselves. And that brings us to our big idea this morning, and that's this. True satisfaction comes from heaven, not from under heaven. True satisfaction comes from heaven, not from under heaven. You know, Solomon became great. History tells us that. His testimony tells us that. People came from all over the world to see the magnificence of his kingdom and hear the brilliance of his wisdom. And as the New Testament tells us, one greater than Solomon has come. The Lord Jesus. The Lord Jesus is the one who has come from heaven. John 6:33, it says, "For the bread of God is he who comes from heaven and gives life to the world." The bread of God, the sustenance from God, the nourishment from God, the health from God. He comes. He's the bread of God who comes down from heaven. It can't be found under heaven, friends. It must come from heaven. And this is partly why the Lord Jesus has come. Because life under the sun, as Solomon's described it, that's not old news, friends. This is the way people are living right now. These are the things that people are pursuing right now by study and by experiencing, trying to find some sort of contentment, some sort of joy, some sort of lasting satisfaction, and they can't find it under heaven. It has to come from heaven. Let's bow in prayer. The good news is that Jesus has come.
Thank you, Jesus.
Jesus has come. And again, like I said last week, we're not just trying to slap some superficial Band-Aid over the monotony and the futility of life and say, well, if you're a Christian, then you're going to have true contentment, true happiness. It isn't that that's not true. It's just that it's not that easy because we know ourselves. And even when we know the true meaning of life, we don't often rest in it. The world and our own lives are more broken than we realize. And the good news is that in the midst of all of that brokenness, God has created for us a more satisfying life than probably any of us have realized up to this point. Jesus is the source of true satisfaction in life. He's the source of meaning, contentment, joy. Have you received him? This is the starting point. Have you received him? Have you received by faith, through repentance, through saying, enough of sin, I want to follow Jesus. Have you received him? And if not, today's the day. Today's the day. All of us can detect those things that are crooked in our lives. They're bent away from God. And one day Jesus is going to make everything turn back toward the way it's supposed to be. He's going to restore the Father's intended created order. But even right now, he is at work making straight what has been made crooked. So you reflect and say, oh God, these things in me need to be straightened out. You're the one who can restore. I wonder, in the list of things that Solomon tried, which of those things are you trying? Which of those things are you trying? And at what point will you, like Solomon, admit that they're not going to work? They're not going to bring you what you need. You're not going to find meaning, happiness, true, lasting joy in those things. The idea is don't ask things under heaven to do for you what Jesus said he would do for you. Don't ask whether it's personal achievement, the acquisition of wealth, alcohol, drugs, sex. I mean, the list goes on, right? Don't ask those things to do for you what Jesus said he would do for you. There's no lasting satisfaction in those things. In their proper place, in their proper boundaries, many of those things are very good. But when we ask them to do for us what Jesus said he would do for us, we've taken them out of their boundaries. I know the hour's late, but I would like to pray. I'm going to receive the offering in just a moment. There's much to think about here. Father, in Jesus' name, we come before you collectively and as individuals. And there's much, Lord, that you would work in our souls in regards to this sermon. There's much here for us, Lord. And I pray it would go beyond this moment of prayer, that it would be something that you would help us to apply our hearts to in the coming days. Where we need to repent, even now, Lord, we say, forgive us, we turn away from these things. Where we need restoration, where we need reoriented, Lord, do your work, I pray. Teach us the truth, Lord. Grant us as your good gifts, contentment, happiness, joy, as we rely upon the Lord Jesus. And help us, Lord. Help us, Lord, to stop the striving apart from you. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.